Austin, Texas. This is Startup Insights, the show about user research for entrepreneurs. And I'm your host, AJ Davis, founder and head of user research at Experiment Zone. And in this episode, have you ever struggled to find your target audience? Well, that's exactly what we're going to help you with on this week's show, where you'll hear how Happy Mask found and learned about their customer base using spreadsheets, Facebook, and a few powerful questions. Today, I'm talking with Happy Mask founder, Melinda Hwang. She's built this company to provide masks that provide breathability and comfort without compromising on protection. She's a mother of 3 young children and a daughter to parents in their late 60s and 70s, so she knows on a very personal level the need to keep her family safe and healthy. Incredibly, she started the company without a business plan, website, or store. I begin by asking Melinda about the spreadsheet. Your spreadsheet. Give us the story. It's so interesting.
Sure. So my mother, who lives in Taiwan, sent us a box of masks back in March. And Taiwan was experiencing coronavirus about a month before it really hit the US. And so she sent us this box, and initially we didn't pay much attention to it. And then as it became clear the importance of wearing masks, we started wearing them as a family when we would go out for walks in the neighborhood. And neighbors started to notice and text us, like, where did you get those masks you were wearing? They look different from others that we've seen. And then some friends who saw pictures I posted on Facebook asked the same thing in the comments. And so everyone basically were asking, like, can you ask your mom to send another box over? Because we would love to try out these masks as well. So I figured, okay, if I'm going to order a few masks for friends and neighbors, why don't I open it up to my daughter's first grade class through her Facebook first grade group. And so I very casual post, basically posted there, hey, here's a picture of some masks my mom sent from Taiwan. They're made by a family friend. If you're interested, just message me and I can add you to the order. And I was thinking maybe I might get like 3 to 5 families who are interested. And there's a flurry of Facebook messages came in and I couldn't keep track. So then I wrote another message and I said, scratch that. I created a Google spreadsheet, and the first tab has rows. You can put your name, the color, the sizes you want to order. By the way, these were certified by Nelson Labs to block out 99.9% of small particles. I put the certifications there in the second tab. And then the third tab has some pictures of me, my husband, and the kids wearing it. I'm a medium, he's a large, and the kids are small. And put your order in. And again, super casual, not really trying to sell it, just kind of like doing it as a favor to the school community. And then it was this crazy thing where I walked away from my computer and I went back 2 hours later, and there's a flurry of messages under my posts. Ordered. I ordered 5. And so then I go look at the spreadsheet and it was like 50 orders in just a few hours. And then what ended up happening was that over the course of 3 days, 1,000 orders were placed. Because what ended up happening is not only did the school community post, but they would then loop in their family, because somehow the picture, the fact they were made in Taiwan, there was a legit filter built in, and that these were certified and had test results, really resonated with people. So I had to shut down the spreadsheet because I wasn't even sure if the man, he's actually a family friend, but he worked with my father. He's the chief scientist at my father's company. And I wasn't even sure if he had that many masks to send here. And sure enough, he didn't. And so it took about over a month actually, for the masks to get here, which is much longer than I thought it would be. But he scrambled and he produced the number that was ordered. And then I basically reached out to people one by one. It's like, hey, your order's ready. I put them in a little brown bag outside of my front door with your name on it. And so one by one, they would come, and our neighbor asked and was like, what's going on with these people driving up your driveway, picking up little bags and leaving? And I just told her, like, very briefly, but I really think a lot of neighbors thought I was running some kind of like a drug operation. And so, yeah, so everyone picked up, and then it was a wave of feedback again after people tried the mask, where they would immediately email or call me and say, hey, these are amazing. I need to get some of these for my mom, or my neighbors saw us wearing these and they asked how we can get some more. And again, it was this wave. And I looked at my husband like, wow, this is what it feels like when you have a product that the market wants. And I was originally working on a different idea, but given the fact that I knew these masks were really good and not readily easily available on the market, and the fact that they were really needed during this time of COVID, where there's a lot of fear and anxiety around the unknown and wanting to protect the people you love. So it was a no-brainer when I decided to shift my efforts to really focusing on making this a business. And so that was probably the early mid-April timeframe.
Oh, it's incredible. So you went from doing a favor for your community to just uncovering this huge need that people had, and really getting, you had the problem first, you wanted a mask, to figuring out everyone else was having the same issue.
Yeah.
How did you get to understand like some of the specifics of what they needed? Why your mask versus some of the other things? Like, why was there such a demand right then for that?
Yeah. So one of the great things about starting off in this very grassroots way is that you really, to get the mask into people's hands, you have to, pick up the phone and call them or email them. And beyond this group of my daughter's classmates in their network, I actually created a second spreadsheet that I had posted to my college, like the Wellesley Moms group, as well as my own Facebook network. And same thing, that went, I like to say, like, small scale viral as well. But the thing about that was that people began ordering in the second Google spreadsheet, and they were not people whose names I recognized. And so, going beyond, 1 or 2 degrees of separation kind of helped me really validate what it was that people were feeling and thinking. Because again, I placed a second order. This is all while I was still trying to work on building my site. So I had no site, and I was just selling through the spreadsheet for another month after that. And every time I had to collect the payment and ship the mask out, I would literally have to email or call. And people love to talk about their situation. And so they would tell me things like, oh, I spent $100 on these cute masks from Etsy for my kids. And I even let them choose the patterns, but it's not breathable at all. And it sticks to their nose and their mouth, and they won't wear them. So I can't let my kids out of the house now because I'm scared, and they don't know social distancing. So I'm so glad to see you have these masks that are designed in a way that's meant to be more comfortable and breathable and doesn't stick against your face. And so I started a few things that kind of stuck out in the second round of spreadsheet sales that I made was it was very clear it was the mom in the household that was buying for her kids, her husband, herself, as well as her parents. And she really felt it was a very emotional purchase. If you could bottle peace of mind into a product, that was what they were looking for in a mask. And the fact that these had all these elements that made them fit well, especially for kids' spaces where, they're quite a broad range. And so these have adjustable ear straps and adjustable nose wire. And so it could create a snug face for kids' shapes of all sizes, as well as adults. And so I saw them buying for the people they loved. And I also felt a lot of their anxiety around, up to that point, not having found a really great solution. And this was in April. Like right now, a lot of the big clothing and fashion retailers all have masks available to purchase. Back in the spring, the first crop was really a lot of Etsy sellers. There weren't a lot of options that had an actual tested filter built into the mask. And so the group that was purchasing was one that kind of cared about that, the fact that these were tested, that these were proven to be safe. They asked a lot of questions about where they were from, And so I would tell them the story about, the fact that these were made by a scientist who our family has known for almost 20 years, and he has a PhD in filtration science, and he's been perfecting this for almost 20 years in Taiwan, which is a very mature mask market. And so this wasn't an overnight COVID product. And so there's just so many elements of the product that really resonated with people. And so I talked to hundreds of people in the process of, selling and fulfilling off of the spreadsheet. And every one of those conversations fed into how I designed the messaging for the site, the visuals, because I was doing it all at the same time. And so what I had planned to put on the site shifted as I had so many conversations. And, I think that is one of the great things about really talking to customers and finding a way to do that. Because it was just me and the fulfillment needed that one-on-one touch. It wasn't even necessarily like your typical, what you would call customer service is just simply like trying to fulfill the order. But I think, being in close contact with the customer at all times and asking them questions. I think I love to ask, who are you buying it for? And is this the first time you bought masks? And once you ask a couple questions, they just open up. And because I was kind of fishing for those insights to help shape my messaging for the site, I was really hungry for all of that information.
Yeah, I think that's so inspiring. Like, you took this opportunity that was here and you were able to connect all the dots because the product existed, and you just needed to help connect the people and get it to the people in the community and then beyond. What I love about what you just said too is that you were asking questions. So, for our audience, it's really helpful to hear examples of what works and what doesn't. So did you find that there were certain questions that really opened up the conversations, or questions maybe that you tried that just weren't really opening the door, creating conversation?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I always wanted to understand was who were the people buying, because especially when it expanded beyond my normal network, I didn't necessarily have a really clear picture as to like who was the customer who this product was resonating with. And, one of the interesting things that popped up was that it was really resonating with the medical community. And this was even before I had my website up. And it happened to be that one doctor had purchased it and loved it, and then posted it to a Facebook group of physicians that was, I think, like 8,000 members. And because they were constantly talking about like, okay, has anyone found any great masks? I mean, they have to wear N95s or surgical masks, medical grade masks when they go to work, but they didn't have great options for their family or for themselves outside of work. And this is an audience that is willing to invest in a better quality tested mask, that wants to see the lab reports that we had, and appreciated that versus, just purchasing on design or price. And so I started to piece it together. Okay, the person who is purchasing this is often a mother, purchasing for her family or her elderly parents. And it's also often someone in the medical community who really wants to dig deeper and doesn't want to buy just any mask that's on the market, and is similarly wanting to protect their family. So one of the questions was always around like who they were, like, oh, how did you find out? I think the question I used a lot was like, how did you find out about us? And another question I like to ask was, have you bought other masks before? And then I could understand what it was, what did they buy before, what it was that they didn't like about that was now making them want to buy my mask. And that's when I found out a lot of the issues were around breathability and comfort. This looks cute, or my kid thinks this looks cute, but you can't wear it for more than 5 minutes. And I feel like I'm suffocating when I'm wearing this other mask. It's so not breathable. And I'm going crazy because I can't leave the house. When I go out, I can't wear a mask. So I think during this time, there's so much angst as well. And I think that's where a lot of the emotion comes in. And so you start talking to people and you realize all of the emotion they feel around mask and protection, combined with the uncertainty of the times. And I think like as I had a lot of those conversations, it became important to me to try to message this in a positive way versus like a fear-driven way, because I knew there was a lot of that already in the community and through these conversations. A fear of the unknown, fear of job security, financial situations, not wanting to get sick. And so I was really clear when I started to build the site, and I also created a promo video, was that the goal of these is to let people feel comfortable to go back to aspects of the life that they have missed. And so versus, kind of like a lot of the more negative messaging that you sometimes see around, products around coronavirus.
Yeah, it's so fascinating that these like personas emerged for you as you were talking to people and finding out what groups they found you in or who connected you. What advice do you have for people who are looking to build off of the kind of thing that you did, where you use Facebook communities? Were there certain types of things you said or certain types of groups that you found were more engaged as you were trying to do some discovery?
I think I have a few pieces of advice. I would say I have okay. Regarding the Facebook groups piece, some advice I have is choose groups that are more tight knit and share some kind of affinity, where people are very supportive yet open. And I'll give a few examples. I had posted about my mask to the LA Mommies group, which is, I can't even remember how many thousands. I mean, it's in the hundreds of thousands. And it's like your message basically goes out into a sea of messages and doesn't stand out at all, and no one responds. And it's really hard to get any kind of valuable feedback or any kind of resonance there. The groups that did the best, and I owe so much to my undergrad college group, Wellesley. The first group I posted to when I actually with the spreadsheet before I even had a site, and again when I had the site, was to the Wellesley parents group, because I knew this was a group of is like the bullseye for the target, who I knew was buying these masks, parents, educated, cared about the science. And that group has continued to be such a valuable, not just, supporting through buying the mask, but also being really open with giving feedback as well. And, I'll give you a few examples. They've told me like, hey, I love your mask, but it's too small for my husband's face. Even the large is too small. And that became a theme. And so like right now we're trying to make a bigger, large, or create an extra large size. And, I think like what's also great about that group is that they love to tell stories. So they love to share, like, I just got these for my daughter. She wouldn't wear any mask before trying these. And here she is in preschool now wearing it, and so she posted, and there's kind of that social affirmation, where it's like, oh, I saw so many other Wellesley moms post how great these masks are, so I decided to buy it too. So, it's kind of like I feel like that group is almost like a mini group of super fans, but also a really great sounding board. So when I was trying to figure out the next color to launch, I posted a survey there, and they're really open with helping. And they're like, I like the colors, but what I really want you to do is create a floral. And so I'm now creating a floral using the color that won the survey. So, I think whenever you can find smaller groups, I would say not more than maybe like 5,000 members, who the vibe of the group is very open, very supportive. And there are many of them. It doesn't have to be a college group. It can be, there was another group that was called FEMPS. It's all about female entrepreneurs. And that was another very supportive group that I got invited to join that I wasn't a part of before. And there's thousands of them on Facebook. So I think like finding the right groups to be a sounding board to try your product, especially in the beginning, it's just so helpful to get your product into people's hands and getting feedback. And in the very beginning, I was selling these at cost. I wasn't, before I launched the site and the spreadsheet, I was not really making money, but I was just trying to get it into people's hands to get feedback. And I knew, and I started to see this trend, like when people try it, they love it, and then they come back and get more. And so that was very validating and gave me confidence, because when you're starting, your mind is so full of doubts and uncertainties, and like, will anyone buy this? Will anyone like it? And so like that, finding ways to get into people's hands and getting feedback and reacting to it and acting on it helps very much with not just making sure you're messaging the product correctly, you're offering the correct product, but also gives you confidence from a mental perspective, because it is incredibly mental starting a business.
Yeah. And I'm hearing you even talk about a couple of different ways you got feedback too. So you mentioned that you were collecting feedback from people in the spreadsheet or in the Facebook groups or phone calls. And then I also heard you mention that you put together a survey. So how did you decide which ways you were going to learn certain types of things, and how did you structure getting the feedback?
Yeah. So the more, I would say, like the more insightful feedback happened from conversations I had with people who had purchased on the spreadsheet. And I loved, like, if they had a phone number there, because you could put your email or phone number, I always called, because that was the best way to have conversations versus, email. Sometimes it's very transactional. So whenever I could have an actual conversation, like, jumped at that opportunity. And that's when, one question could lead to another. And I always had like the first questions I would ask, and depending on how they answered or how open they were to talking, I would ask more. And sometimes it would get very detailed, one customer was saying, my kid thinks your masks are comfortable, but she doesn't really like how any of them look. And so I was like, okay, what is it she doesn't like? And she's like, well, she really likes animals, and you don't have any cute animals, and the colors aren't bright enough. And I was like, well, what are her favorite animals? And so then you can start to collect, more detailed information. And the customers who love to talk and who are open to like sharing more information, they're like gold mines, because you can go on and on. Sometimes the conversations would go on for 30 minutes. There's also, like, for this category, there were some customers who were very, very mask involved, who bought masks before COVID, and they would buy. There were a couple big players before COVID. One's called Vogue Mask, one's called Cambridge Mask Company. They have filters, and so they would love to talk to me about how mine compared to those, and that was also hugely helpful. And I learned from that. It's like, okay, mine, they all have filters. They've all been tested by Nelson Labs, but somehow they find mine to feel more lightweight and more breathable. So I should really focus on that, on top of the protection piece. And so you start to understand, like, among different competitive sets, how is it that I should message? So yeah. And then in terms of the survey, like, that was helpful if I just needed a very simple, quick feedback on something. So I had 5 colors I wanted to get feedback on. And I was like, oh, for sure, olive green is the best next color, because it's becoming fall and winter. And, it was a no-brainer to me. It was like, I'll post a survey. And then periwinkle won. And I think that's a great lesson in that, don't do things in a silo. Don't assume you have all the answers. Whenever you can get feedback. And I posted that survey to the Wellesley group, and I think I got 500 responses. And I also posted to the brand's Facebook and Instagram pages as well. I got a couple hundred. It was all consistent to this, leading to this periwinkle and needing a brighter, more floral color. And I realized that people felt like our colors were too dark, especially given that the main target was a woman. I should create a more, woman-friendly, feminine design. And so, all of these opportunities to get feedback have really shaped the direction of, the product development, as well as the messaging. And it's so valuable to do it.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're just doing it. You're just like doing it every step, every moment you have a chance to get feedback, you're collecting it. Sometimes when we ask questions, we get feedback that's hard to hear, or that sometimes I like to reframe it as a gift. So we get a gift or criticism. What have you heard that was harder to hear, and what did you do with that information?
Yeah. So there have been a few pieces of feedback that were harder to hear. So I mentioned this earlier, but about the size issue, and because masks are such a personal, there's so much anxiety around it and the need for it. I've gotten quite a few very angry emails about, when the size doesn't fit a larger face, and sometimes feels very personal, like almost like I personally chose not to make it big enough to protect this person. And I think it definitely took some time for me to distance myself from the feedback, because when it's your business, you take everything very, very personally. And so, I think it took a good number of weeks, especially in the beginning when we started to grow. The more you sell, the more pieces of hard to hear feedback you will get. And when people are not at all connected to you, they don't hold back. So I think, first of all, making sure that you respond in a very calm way, and you take action. If it's a theme like this was with the sizing, now we're in the process of making a larger size. Another feedback that was really hard is, initially we had a slightly less expensive line of masks that we called the base series, and some people loved it because it was really lightweight. It didn't have a trim, and that's why it was less expensive. But one of the drawbacks of that, because it didn't have a trim, is the ear straps are not sewn on. So if you pulled on it, the ear straps could break. And the people, when you're wearing a mask and the ear strap breaks, your first feeling is frustration and anger, especially if you just spent $18 on it. So I would get these emails that were very worded very strongly, like you have a quality issue. And that hurt, because we care a lot. And every time that happened, I would send a free one. And what I ended up doing later is I would swap them for a pro series, because I just didn't want it to happen anymore. And then eventually, a few weeks ago, we just discontinued it altogether, because to me, it wasn't worth it to, even though it was a really small percentage, I think we tracked, it was less than 5% where this happened, of the base series sales. But my goal is to make sure that there is never that feeling of frustration and anger and feeling let down or cheated that I just bought this mask and the ear strap broke. So just pulled it off the market. And for me, it became this thing where every time I packed a base series, I felt this feeling of like, oh, I hope that your strap doesn't break. And once you start to feel that, it's like you got to not sell it anymore. So that was a piece of feedback that basically resulted in us deciding to just pull that from the market. So, it's never smooth sailing always from the start. And I think the negative feedback, is truly a gift. Like if you can get over it feeling personal, or, feeling, when this is your baby and you pull all of your heart and soul into a business and you get upset customers, it's hard, but all of that, I can, especially talking to you now, I can say absolutely, those are all gifts. And when you can take that feedback and act on it, you will create a better experience and a better brand and products that you can stand behind without any hesitation.
That's so interesting. And it's so great that you've responded to feedback that way. What's up next for your business?
One of the biggest challenges of the last few months has just simply not being able to ramp up at the pace of sales. And so we were doing pre-orders. We're still doing pre-orders where we ship about 2 to 3 weeks after the customer places an order. And it creates so many complexities with fulfilling, with customer service, because half of the calls or emails we get are, where's my order? And my kids are starting school. It's very, a lot of stress around that. So we just invested in a second machine to produce the filters more quickly, and fingers crossed, very hopeful that we can start to close that wait time, because we really don't like making customers wait 2 to 3 weeks. So getting that taken care of is first and foremost. And then it's interesting. I feel like masks have evolved into a clothing accessory. And so we have always been very much focused on the comfort and the science, and that will never change. That's really key to how we are different. But when I look at the market, I do think that very few other mask companies are able to bridge really great and interesting and fun designs, while also providing that comfort and breathability. And so it's almost like you got the really trendy, cute patterns that are now being sold at like Anthropologie or, Gap. And then you have the really hardcore, tested, proven mask with filters. And there's so many of them now. There used to only be like 2 or 3, and now there are a lot of them. But they come in like black and white color, or, not really interesting designs. And so finding a way to bridge that. And we're really seeing this. Our approach has always been wanting this to be a long-term business, so not just during COVID. And so, I think, people are much more comfortable, and the stigma around wearing masks doesn't exist the way it did pre-COVID. And I think there's a lot of awareness now where, like during flu season, if you're immune compromised, or if you're just a parent wanting to make sure your kid doesn't get the flu or get colds as easily, putting a mask on them when they go to more crowded places. During wildfire season, which is, something that California, where we are, has been struggling with these last few days. We've been getting calls and emails around, can these protect against inhaling smoke? And the filter itself is really great. And with the seal, it certainly helps when you're going out with making sure you're not breathing in a lot of those small particles from fire. And then allergy season, I think there's so many applications, or even going to like traveling to more polluted places. I think one of the things COVID has taught us is it has made us a lot more aware of the air we breathe. And for us, we'd love to start to shift to thinking about that and messaging around that. And, I think people have asked me before, are you going to sell other products beyond masks? And I think there's a lot of benefit to being very focused right now, possibly someday, but I think there's just so much more opportunity just within the mask market. And our business to date has purely grown only through word of mouth organically, which is pretty amazing. And the reason I haven't put any focus on marketing is because of our supply challenges. But I would love to, my heart and soul and what I did before this was all around marketing. And so the idea of like figuring out how do we push, expand to markets beyond where we've been, and how do we form partnerships with various groups, and how do we continue to make this interesting for our existing customer base, because we have a very loyal and supportive customer base right now, which is spreading the word for us. And so I want to create a loyalty referral program that is high on my list. But all of those, first we got to get our supply controlled, and then I'd love to think about all these other things.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing your story today. This is so fascinating how you just kind of came into this business and now you're seeing all these opportunities ahead. So thanks for sharing what you've learned. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure our audience is finding some great tips for how they can grow their businesses too. You mentioned that you have a special offer for our audience. So how can they find you and how can they take advantage of the offer?
Sure. So I'll be creating a custom discount code that will give you free shipping off of any order. So that will be in the show notes. And I'm just really happy to be able to speak with you about this journey. And also hopefully the tips will be helpful to your audience.
Thanks so much for being on today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Startup Insights with AJ Davis. If you like our show and want to know more, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Listen on the go with SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/startupinsights.